2013 had a lot of comics this year, and after buying a whole mess of them, single issues, trade paperbacks, getting CBR downloads, a whole mess of downloads from Comixology as well, I'm here to say my top 10 series, miniseries, and events that I thought were the greatest ones of this year. Starting off right into it with my number 10, which is The Bunker. And this is one that I've been downloading digitally, which is a story about a group of friends who find this bunker with a whole mess of letters that are written to them from the future versions of themselves. And what's written in these letters is causing them to get a little crazy because it shows relationships that they have with each other that they haven't yet experienced, events that are about to happen that are either very personal or very catastrophic that are about to happen, and it's about how they're going to deal with these situations. And it's one that's very investful. The art's very tricky a little bit. It's very, like sort of dark and mixes in a lot, and it gets a little confusing at times, but the story is what intrigued me, and that is why it is my number 10. But moving on to my number 9, which was a miniseries at first and then became an ongoing, is Todd the Ugliest Kid on Earth, which is the story of a kid who's so ugly they put a paper bag over his head. And this book is complete insanity. It's just crazy. The characters in this are just complete scum, but what I love about this book is that they make so many references to other things, pop culture, Comic-Con. They make fun of a lot of other artists who are in the comic book industry, and it's just a crazy story, but I completely love it. It's so like dark, twisted humor, but it's definitely one to check out because, again, the references that they make, and especially to a lot of Comic-Con events and other comic book series that are going on as well. Number 8 is a newer one that's hooked me, and that is Trillium, and what I've loved about this is that they have this really cool thing when you're reading it and then you have to read it backwards, and it's about these two people, one's sort of like from the future, one's a scavenger today, and they've met up in this place where I believe the flowers are what's called Trillium, and there's this whole like alien society that's living in there, so they don't know, it's like all these three people do not know their language, and I like the way that the book shows that, how they're communicating with each other, how they perceive each other, and you see both of their points of view, because the book, especially in the first one, you read it one way, and then you have to read it the other way to see both points of view, and I love that about this series, and they continue doing really cool stuff like that, so it's one to definitely check out as it continues growing. My number 7 is one that's tampering a little bit in its latest issues, but it had a really strong start, and that is Bedlam, which is the twisted version of how you see a complete like serial killer, like super villain, going good because of this therapy that he has to go through, and he starts helping out the police. So it's completely crazy, especially with the art. The art's just like so bloody and it's insane, but it's really interesting seeing this point of view of a psychopath going good. So definitely check it out. My number 6 is one that, because it's so new, it's a little bit lower on the list, but if it had more issues, it would probably be a lot higher, and that is Alex plus Ada, or Alex and Ada, which is the story of a boy, or a young man, who doesn't have any relationships going on, yet his grandma has a relationship going on with this new robot that she has. So this is a futuristic story, sort of like her, but here the grandma gets him this robot called Ada. He names it Ada, and it's the relationship that he's starting with this robot, sort of, as we see in the beginning. And it's just so interesting seeing this whole new world that they have of the future that seems, like, that can be real because they have like technology, sort of like Bluetooth, but in their heads. They have all these different programmings that they have all around them. And I like, just like in Her, where they have this society in the future that does seem possible. It's not all flying cars and crazy things like that. But I like the chemistry between this person and the robot of Ada, and I'm really curious to see how that's going to go on. It's completely hooked me in the first 2 issues that's been on there, and again, maybe next year is probably going to be in a higher part in my list. Number 5 is coming from Brian K. Vaughan, who wrote my hands down favorite series of all time, Y: The Last Man, and it is his new series, Saga, which is continuing to build this world that is just amazing. It's just building all these characters, and I'm never into like these whole aliens, galactic things like that. I wasn't into Infinity this year at all, but this world that he creates, because he knows how to craft his characters, is just genius. And it's a story about two people who is sort of like a Romeo and Juliet, sort of like a West Side Story, where they're from completely different sides. Their whole families, their whole planets hate each other, but they've had this kid together, and it's how they're going to raise this kid, how this kid is going to survive, and he's created an amazing world. Not up to the standards that Y: The Last Man's world was, but it is definitely a series to check out. My number 5 is All New X-Men, which I'm completely loving. After it follows the events of Avengers vs. X-Men, and it had the whole crossover with Battle of the Atom this year, I have been completely in love with this series. I think it's one of the best ones from Marvel now. I love the fact that they have transported or teleported, however you would want to, time traveled the First Class X-Men to now, and the point where Cyclops in the present has gone crazy, and you also have Xavier dead, and it's just how they're trying to fix the situation by getting the First Class X-Men here, and them getting put into this world where they have no idea what the future was going to be like, and all the complications that come with it, because I love the X-Men, I love the First Class X-Men, I love time traveling, I love Wolverine, and it's just all of that mixed in together beautifully. My number 3 goes to an event that was a crossover between a lot of the DC, starting out with the Trinity War and leading into what is Forever Evil, which I am completely loving. I love the fact that it was a whole twist on what the whole Trinity thing was, and then the whole Forever Evil month that we had with the villains taking over. I thought it was completely amazing, but the ones to definitely check out is the Trinity War, especially with the Justice League, and then checking out the Forever Evil series that I believe there's 7 parts that's still going on right now, and also ties in with the recent Justice League issues as well. But this is what an event should be. It is just completely crafted to perfection, gets all of the characters correct, and puts them into one big storyline where every person has their part, even the villains, even the most minor villains, and I'm loving it completely. Even the Forever Evil, the Arkham Wars, I would say is the best spin-off title to it, but it's definitely one to check out if you haven't been on board, because Infinity, to me, was nowhere near as great as what they were able to do with this, and that is why it is my number 3. My number 2 goes to one that did start last year, but in my defense, it did end this year, and it's one that seems very controversial. To me, it seemed very controversial, and that's why I didn't want to read it. But after reading The Wake and seeing how Sean Murphy was doing the art there with Scott Snyder, and he was doing a phenomenal job with that, I decided, you know what, I've been hearing a lot of good things about this, so I'm going to check it out. And Punk Rock Jesus is one great story. Like, it's very controversial, but it brings it up in a manner that's showing you, a lot of the problems that's going on with the religion today, and it's showing you how crazy technology can be in the future, and the consumption of reality TV that we have now, because what it is a story of this one man who's trying to run this business of reality shows, and he's saying, we're finding, sort of like in Jurassic Park, the slightest DNA of what they believe is Jesus Christ's DNA, and they're going to duplicate him and have Jesus Christ 2.0 in a sense. He's blaspheming, saying that they're going to have the return of Jesus Christ and put it as a reality show from the moment that he's born up to him being an adult. And it's, without ruining how the story goes, it is a mini-series of 6 issues, but I love the things that it tackles. I love the character development that it had with it, and it actually really surprised me as being one of the greatest miniseries out there, because usually they end very sloppily. This one wasn't the strongest ending, but I still liked how it followed throughout for all 6 issues. So it's definitely one to check out if you were borderline about it or if you haven't heard about it before. But my number 1 series that I've fallen in love with, and it's one that's really difficult to explain, is Morning Glories. The best way that I can explain it is that it's lost in comic book form, and that is the greatest thing to say about this, because when I asked my friend, I was like, wait, what is this about? I always see it in the comic book story. It's got like the very nice artwork, very like skimpy girls in the like uniforms for school, and he could never really explain it. But the best way, I guess the most simplest, it's a group of kids who go to this Morning Glories Academy. But this academy that's supposed to be so prestigious really has a lot of secrets, and it gets into time traveling. You see a lot of flashbacks, a lot of things from other issues that get reshown here. I love how the artwork, there's like something hidden that you won't see till like issues later, and that's why I love this series. And the best way to really experience it and get the gist of it is to actually read it, because it's so difficult. There's so many twists and turns in this, and that is why it's my number 1 series of 2013, as it builds up also as well. I'm very curious to see where it's going to go. But Morning Glories, I'm so glad that I checked it out, and I highly recommend it to everybody else, because it will completely just dismantle your brain. You'll get so invested into it because it's just so crazy. But those are my top 10 issues, series, mini runs, whatsoever. All the comics that came out of this year, these were the top 10 that really stood out to me. But let me know what yours were. Let me know what your favorite issues, who your favorite characters, your favorite artists, anything about comics down below, and I'll see you guys next time.